In Luke 5, there is an unusual scene in which Jesus heals a man with paralysis. There were other important players in the scene too. The paralyzed man had good friends, neighbors who were so intent on bringing the man to Jesus that they took him to the roof of the house where Jesus was teaching. They made an impromptu skylight and lowered the man right into the lap of Jesus. There were Pharisees there too, causing trouble, as Pharisees do. So the paralyzed man was lowered in, and when Jesus saw their faith, he said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven." And here's where Jesus stirred up the Pharisees. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law began thinking to themselves, "Who is this fellow who speaks blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" The crowd wasn't the only obstacle between that paralyzed one and his healing from Jesus that day. There was that practical obstacle of all those people, the obstacle overcome by zealous friends who went to extraordinary measures, but there was also the obstacle of the religious ones. Religious people too often stand in the way of people finding what they need in Jesus. Religious people stand in judgment. Religious people hold up the process, stating, "Well, that isn't the way it's done." Religious people resist change. Religious people don't even want to endure the slightest bit of inconvenience. Religious people want people to behave before they believe or belong. Religious people put up barriers, especially for the marginalized, especially for the poor and the outsiders, the needy and the unclean. We religious people can so easily be an obstacle. I sure hope we wouldn't align ourselves with the Pharisees, challenging Jesus and standing in the way of someone receiving what they need from Jesus. We wouldn't want to be those types of people, but maybe we should consider how we might be like a Pharisee from time to time and rid ourselves of that behavior. When we are bound and blinded by our religious pursuits in such a way that it stands as an obstacle to getting others to Jesus, we are like those inward-focused Pharisees standing in opposition to Jesus. When Jesus is at work, let's be sure not to stand in the way. Let's be sure not to be too awfully concerned with our demands and even our questions, especially our preferences or our comfort. Let's be sure not to be overly concerned with the form of things, and let's be sure to have an outward focus like Jesus, being more like those friends who lowered their friend in the lap of Jesus, breaking through barriers rather than raising up barriers.